Hello everyone, this is an update on my Losi Baja Rey. I've been doing a couple scale details to it to kind of get everything the way I want it. I've already done more of a scale conversion with my on-road touring car, and I saw the Losi Baja Rey. It already came with a lot of the details that I want out of a scale. Trophy truck ready to go. This is pretty much a dream come true in that sense. There's still some details I want to do here, like fire extinguishers, remote reservoir for dedicated dampener shocks go in here. Make it more like the real thing in that way. Still need to figure that out. I have Racing fire extinguishers on order. Should be here sometime soon. I won't bother with an update for that because those are pretty minor details unless they super impress me. Most notably here is the custom interior. So we have these axial side mirrors here with some clear PTE that's been kind of custom cut to fit against the roll cage. This is in a kind of cheap local hobby store LED light bar. It's not terribly bright, but the size was perfect, so I made my own mount. This actually mounts directly into the roll cage. Same with this rear light bucket, it's also custom made, mounts directly onto the roll cage. That's actually, both the front and the back are hooked up to an LED controller that plugs into the receiver so that it can actually have functioning brake lights. I got this little toolbox at the back, courtesy of Proline. I had to kind of see in there, chop it up a bit to get it to fit on the roll cage properly, but you can crack that open and it all fits in there. There's two screws going into the roll cage that are kind of holding it on there. I've bashed with this on. Sometimes it flips open, but it never pops off. I might put the spare axles that came with in there, but I'll need to hold them down with shoe goo. In the back here, I actually trimmed the inside mesh of the gas tank where this spare tire actually bolts onto, so it doesn't actually go all the way through anymore. It only fastens to the top plate. So if you unscrew the bottom, you can actually take the entire spare tire and the entire top of this pseudo gas can off, and there's enough space inside for a LiPo battery. Kind of something I did to see if it would work. I don't really have any plans for that yet, unless I get a brighter front light bar. I might run a dedicated 3S pack through the back here. That'd just be kind of nice, so to keep things integrated into the cage if I want to take it off, less wires to kerfuffle with. What's this bumper? She's broken. This something about the design here. I don't know. That it seems like they tried to give it some webbing to reinforce it, but it just isn't enough. Frankly, where it joins there is joining in 3 separate sections, all pretty thick pieces of composite plastic there. So there's no give. This just is never going to flex anywhere. So all the stress is going into this little plastic rod on either side, and it's just not enough to survive an endo with this truck, especially when it's hurtling around with the motor I have in it right now. Back to the custom interior here. This is actually, you can see the gloss here, it's very different than normal. This is actually a piece of thermoformed ABS I did at my workplace using a custom mold made out of MDF. It's based off of the stock insert with only a couple changes to accommodate my drivers in here. You can see these little guys. get some light. So you can see them in there. The seats are actually dedicated separate seats made out of ABS and then folded to shape, and then they have some blue foam, kind of look like the seat padding on there. The figures are actually built out of 6mm Kratex foam in layers and then cut to shape. The driver on the right was actually given joints to kind of go with that foam. So they're very, 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 very phenomenally light. And the clothes are made out of just white polyester blend fabric that is just trimmed to shape, and then I use threadless sewing glue because I'm not doing micro threading with that. It's not worth it. And yeah, it seemed to fit together well. The harness is made out of actual strap material, so it looks a little more scale. I think you can see the kind of got the legs going down there. The new insert tray is a different shape than the old one, as you can kind of tell. Where the ESC mounts is a little more snug. It doesn't have that huge gap extending all the way to the back. It just has enough to expose the heatsink properly, and then the rest of the cabling, especially for the LEDs, is kind of tucked in behind where that new raised section is. But it's still not higher than the fake fans at the back there, so it doesn't really get in the way. These drivers are, as you might have seen in a previous video I did, hooked up to mini servos. Got the box for those in case you want to see them. So here are the servos here, the Emax ES-08A2 servos. They came with a bunch of hardware and everything you need. I actually dremeled holes inside the helmet and the steering wheel, and then trimmed down the servo horns that it came with to make them just round without the actual horn piece sticking out, and then CA glued inside the hole that I dremeled so that the helmet and the steering wheel of my little model interior in here are actually keyed and then bolted directly onto the servo. So there's no cables or gimmickry going on. Everything's pretty heavily integrated. You see here, I kind of got a bit of a sticker going for the center console. I'm still looking out for a better way to do these vinyls. I might contact somebody in town to do a better screen printed vinyls or something dedicated instead of what I'm using right now, which is basically just paper labels that you'd usually use when you're sending your mail, just with the print on them. So I mean that'll do for now, I guess, but it's not a hardly permanent solution. Alright, let's rotate this around. This is just made out of wire mesh from an old screen window that I had sitting around for some reason, but no, it ended up being very convenient for me. Oh, that light does not like that. Okay, that's better. You can see in here there's actually an LED in behind where the dash is going to be. I don't have the stickers for that ready yet. And there's also one behind where the GPS panel is going to be. Now, while I'm at it, you can kind of see that there's a little notepad that the passenger is wearing. You know, if you're driving through the Baja 500 and you gotta have notes, what you're doing, where you need to go. You know, those are there. Also got a little fire extinguisher kind of sitting in here. It's kind of buried in behind. Can't really see it very well. Yeah. You can kind of see it in there. There it is. So it's nice and comfy strapped in there. Just try to use shoe glue where I can because it's It's a contact cement that's more flexible than something like CA, which is very rigid. I don't mind using the CA on the Cratex because it's foam, so I mean it's already pretty spongy. I don't have to worry about it exploding on impact or anything. With the CA, can snap from the shock. So, what else do we have in here? I have lots of switches going on. And over here, you can kind of see the Ess-one module. This is a first edition Ess-one. This isn't the 1 Plus, which has the extra lead for horn sounds. Although I do actually have a 4-channel Futaba receiver in here, so if I wanted to do that, I can. But I did not feel like spending another $130 on getting an extra sound module when I already had this guy sitting around. So he's just held on there with, you see these foam pads with Velcro. It's centered directly where it needs to be, and the sound, you see the speaker there, is going to be coming out basically where the motor would be in the real truck. So that made me happy. It just barely squeezes in there. There you can see it's a push button switch. I had several of these sitting around and I want to do something with them. That intercepts the signal wire going into the sound module. So if you want to turn the sound on or off, you can just use that and press it. That'll push down or push out. It holds its position pretty well. I was driving it around at the RC track and it never accidentally went in or out of position when I didn't want it to, despite some nice fumbles. Yeah. Okay. And then on the other side, I actually have the switch for the ESC on this side specifically. The electronics for this truck are all hooked up to BEC, so all the electronics that are operating separately actually have their own switches, and that includes the ESC. So if I wanted to just test the electronics without having the motor and everything running, then I can do that just by hitting a little toggle switch in there, and it's relatively out of harm's way. So, yeah. The ESC I'm running is not stock. I'm running an SCT-Pro with a 3400 kV censored motor. Very smooth, very strong. Using the 10-tooth pinion because I want to run 3S constantly in this one. So I chose a lower kV motor with a better rotor style inside just for better efficiency and to keep the rotation speed inside the truck a little bit down because the bearings on this thing are kind of small and things wear out quickly with the plastic shafts on the back, and I didn't want to go crazy overpowered like I could have been. It's fast enough. That'll still get you over 40. That's fine. Speaking of 3S, I have this aside here. These are the SMC. These are factory spec 7200 60C 120 burst. These are the biggest batteries I could find that actually fit, and they just barely fit. It is incredibly tight. This poor balance lead almost squished right against the foam of the door, and almost to a concerning degree, but it does fit in there. I'll also do that now. Just barely. You have to kind of make sure that, really make sure that lead's out of the way. Alright, there we go. Try to get this tucked in. I like this little retainer in here. You want to use it if you can use it. It'll keep your strap tucked in out of the way. That's a concern people had with the stock setup, is getting that accidentally in harm's way, and you don't want that. Oh, what else is there? Oh, I haven't shown this yet. That's actually a Traxxas connector inside of there, not the stock EC3. I just trimmed the little retainer and put spacers in there so that it stood off from this rear bulkhead properly, because otherwise if you just insert it normally, it's just going to be sticking out and you can't get your battery in and out because you have a 1/4 of an inch worth of plug just sticking out at you, and you don't want that. So, all right, let's get you in there. You'll hear it boot up immediately because of the BEC. Alright, there's my rear light. There's a yellow constant light, and then the 2 red lights are brake lights. The LED for the dash, that is, again, not in there yet. And the front LEDs, which I wish were brighter. I think my rears are actually brighter than my fronts. Those are RC Lights 3mm LEDs in that custom bucket. So, yeah, that adds, it's a big battery pack. It adds a pretty considerable amount of weight. But this way I can kind of go back and see what's going on here. You can see my little driver got all centered. He's all lit for me now, so I don't have to worry about the flashlight. Alright, I'm using a Futaba 3PL transmitter here. I'm going to back it up so you can see the steering at the same time. I have currently a Savox 1258 in here that I had on an old race truck. All the electronics in here are off an old race truck that has since been retired. So I figured I'd put them in here, and they all fit perfectly. They work perfectly. See the left, and turn to the right. Both the head and the steering wheel are connected to different micro servos. The servos actually had to be connected to an inverter. They had a simple little inverters at the hobby shop I picked up with they had a dedicated pot on a little circuit board they could use to adjust the trim on the servos separately. So that was actually really handy. So it let me get everything centered up really well. You can see them. Okay, you can see that. I have no idea how much dirt's in these tires. I have a set of RC 4-wheel drive scale style Baja claws coming in. They're supposed to work with bead locks, so I do have a set of SCT bead locks, or SCT offset bead locks that you use for Pro Track or whatever, that you can use, that I want to use specifically for this build. Now I gotta go back in here and I'm gonna find the button. Alright, now that button's pressed down. And now the sound module will turn on, and it is very loud. So it's coming directly out of the hood where the engine's supposed to be. I really like these sound modules, it's very nice to work with. Turn that back off. That's a bit too loud. It's really hard to reach the buttons to adjust the volume when the cage is on. You still can if you squeeze a screwdriver inside the little holes there at the front of the roll cage. Inside these gaps, you can reach in there and just barely touch them. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, it's not being adjusted. This is the brake light. So they only come on when you're braking or reversing, but it's an RC light controller, so it does have little toggle switches on there if you want to change how it works. Well, we can go to the other side here. Something I haven't checked here. This is something simple here. I took some chrome tip LED, 5mm LED holders that came with one of my light kits that I had a long time ago, and I just took a clear piece of Lexan, and reamed some holes into it for them and strapped them on there, and then shoe glued that directly onto the body here. So they look a little more like proper mufflers, exhaust tips sticking out of there instead of just the sticker, and add a little bit of dimension to it. That's one thing I'll give the Axial Yeti score, is with they give you lots of molded plastic parts that just add that little bit of flair to the vehicle, especially when you're up close with it, that Baja Rey didn't really go for. But Baja Rey does compensate in quite a few other ways pretty substantially, I think. Alright, you can see our pseudo fans at the back there. They're a bit close to the toolbox. I don't think that's entirely realistic, but that's where they are right now. In behind them is, you can kind of see a mess of an octopus of cables in there. It's from the LEDs. You can still pop this open, and if you do pop this open, you're welcome to a rather loose, currently, receiver that I just didn't have room to mount properly. The funny thing of this receiver is that I've just had it floating there in between some sponge tape, hopefully dampen impacts, and it's fine. It's not going anywhere. I've driven this thing at the bash park that I usually go to. It's an old BMX track with crazy kicker jumps. I've launched this thing around, and it's never come unplugged or damaged or anything like that. The antenna, as you can tell, you haven't seen an antenna because the antenna is actually hidden the way I have it on the inside of the vehicle, just to keep it out of harm's way. And frankly, with these Futaba receiver transmitter combos, I'm getting like 1,000 meter ranges. I can drive it until I can't see it anymore, so it's just, I don't know, yeah, it's better to have it out of harm's way that way. So here, you can kind of see at the top there is an RX connector and a toggle switch. The toggle switch actually handles the LEDs, so you can turn them on and off. I'll do that right now. So now you can see the LEDs are off. It's currently loose, sitting where it is. I want to do something different with it if I can, but there's just not a lot of real estate to work with my truck situation here. Let's get in there. Put this back on. I usually have them on anyway. They don't consume that much power, so I don't mind having them on all the time, really. That dedicated receiver plug is for my programming box. Take this and get this lead over to this connector. It's a bit hard to fish it in. Just getting it in behind this Proline suspension. But it is a lot easier than having to take off the roll cage quite substantially. So I'll just accept that. This is an extender lead. Alright, it's in. Now you can see Hobbywing program box. So I'll press OK, connecting. Usually with the Hobbywing ESCs, you have to turn them on and then off again. You have to make sure it's connected when it turns on. So I can go back to the switch, the remote switch that I have down here, turn that off, turn it back on again. I'll connect. There we go. See? Alright, now I can get in, and I can adjust all my items. Speaking of items to adjust, I should turn that up. 3.2. I had a problem earlier having it that low. Yeah, it's still a little low, but I think that'll work. Okay, it's okay. Save data, okay. Alright, go back, turn it off, unplug it, and I can close the fans at the back here, neutral position, and turn that back on. Alright, so there you go. I was kind of thinking it might be fun to have a more permanent place for this where it could just stick around somewhere, but honestly I don't know where that would be, so I gave up on that idea. I'm already using up too much real estate. There's basically, especially with the new insert that I have in here. It's hard to show earlier. I'll get in here now and show you. But the new insert is really deep. It actually goes so low that it smacks right against the battery retainer on the other side. So this side's a little bit better. I wanted to have at least some room. This Integy heatsink I had to modify to fit the Hobbywing motor because the Hobbywing motors have a built-in heatsink that's already sticking out. So the Integy one was not going to fit. And so I had to do a little trimming there on the heatsink mount. And it's on there now though. It's good. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, so it's as deep as it's ever going to go. I actually had to make a little cutout on the other side for the bolt that's sticking up from the battery retainer because it was that deep. Thank you very much for joining me for this little walk around the current state of the build. All the details I'm doing now are pretty minor. I want the dedicated dampener shocks with remote reservoirs for the back, from like a wheel truck. Potentially put on a set of those Racing fire extinguishers on the back here somewhere. I'm not sure if I want to go upper or lower. I was kind of taking inspiration from the Gymco trucks, so I should put the fire extinguisher at the lower mount if I want to keep in tune with that particular inspiration there, but otherwise that's the most important stuff. Yeah, got a new bumper on order. So. Oh, these backed out on me. Nobody's carrying hexes the right size for this truck. It doesn't use the 7mm, it uses 8mm. These are extra thick stubs, and nobody around town carries them. They only carry 7. Or the 12, like the big 8-scale buggies and Revos and stuff. So, yeah, I had to take some lock nuts I had sitting around and use some spring locking washers in behind there and tighten it on. It's held perfectly fine. I just used a bunch of blue Loctite on the front and the back. These aren't going anywhere anymore. They're really hard to get on and off. So that's good. Yeah, this dedicated rear tire I did actually have to use once. That felt pretty good. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure what other updates I will be doing other than some running videos hopefully soon. And I will see you all later.